Hey Cicada, I noticed something and I wanted to ask you a question.
Oh, yeah? What would be on your mind?
You mentioned a while back that other animals have died on this farm. What ends up happening to them?
That's a simple answer. We burn them.
What? Why?
Well, we had a tragedy at one point. I'll have to tell you the tale of the last time we killed all the animals on the farm.
We had to kill every animal on the farm. That was only the beginning. Buy more tanks.
This morning, we put Rosemary down. I hated using the captive bolt gun, but it was part of the job. After 23 years, I had the most experience on the farm. I came here as a young hothead, zero experience, way too much attitude. It didn't take long before they broke me in like a horse. The real old timers taught me everything: how to be a proper hand who could fix anything around the farm, while still taking care of the animals day in and day out. The dairy had exactly 179 cows, 13 horses, 6 dogs, a lot of cats and chickens, and 25 pigs. The owner was Mr. Johnson, or rather, his sons by now. The old man only came out once in a while to check how things were going. But today, after Rosemary, I didn't have anything good to tell him. "Joseph," old Mr. Johnson said, patting my shoulder, "you've put down plenty of cows before. Don't hang your head." "Sure, Mr. J," I said absent-mindedly. "But I've seen a lot of things here. And Rosemary, I don't know what that sore on her body was." The old man waved it off from behind his massive, ancient wooden desk, then pulled a cigarette from his shirt pocket. "She was probably just old, Joseph," he said, taking a long drag. "No point in painting the devil on the wall. You took her up to the hill to bury her?" I nodded. I hated the hill, too. I'd hauled more cows up there over the years than I could count, not to mention the horses and every other piece of livestock that got injured or died on the farm. "Have you seen my son today, Joseph?" the old man asked, puffing away. "The older one's in town, sir," I replied immediately, like a soldier. "Said this morning he had something to take care of. Haven't seen the younger one anywhere today." "Humph. It's already noon," Mr. Johnson muttered. "If you see him, tell him I'm looking for him." I nodded, turned, and walked out of the old man's office. I knew Mr. Johnson well by then, especially the part where his wife wouldn't let him smoke, so he hid out here to sneak cigarettes. I was standing on the front porch of the main house. Working in the summer heat was hard enough, and the fact that the morning had already started out so badly had already put a shadow over the entire day. In the distance, I watched Samson. He was the only horse still kept outside at that hour. Poor thing had to stay alone in the pasture anyway, but that was his own fault. He was a bit aggressive with the others, so it was safer to let him run by himself. "Joseph!" a voice snapped me from my thoughts. It was one of the new guys. Couldn't have been more than 20. His sunburned face made his light blue eyes stand out even more. But it was the nervous look on his face that had bothered me now. "Joseph!" he repeated, jogging over to me. I adjusted my hat and walked toward him before he could pass out in the heat. "What is it, kid? What happened?" I asked as soon as I reached him. "Boss," the boy said, almost whispering, "Boyd found a few more." "Found what?" I frowned, confused. "More cows with sores," he said nervously. "Bullshit. That's impossible," I snapped. "I checked them all this morning. Other than Rosemary, none of them had anything wrong." The boy just shrugged, the same anxious fear still stuck on his face. "Show me where," I said, and immediately followed him. They were in barn 3. A few of the other hands had already gotten there, staring at it like it was some kind of attraction. The kid cleared a path for us, and we made it all the way to the fence of the pen. Most of the cows had backed themselves against the walls. They were lowing like always, but this time it felt like they were afraid of something. 3 cows stood apart from the rest. Large, palm-sized red patches covered their bodies. They were oozing pus, and a disgusting yellow fluid ran down their sides. Jesus Christ, I muttered under my breath. The others just stared at the cows, talking quietly among themselves. No one wanted to say out loud what this would turn into if we didn't act fast. "All right, everyone get back to work," I shouted. "I think there's plenty to do." No one said a word. I was the senior hand out there, and most of the time, they listened to me. "You," I said, grabbing the blue-eyed kid by the arm. "You're coming with me. Help me with them." The boy swallowed hard. I couldn't tell if he'd rather disappear with the others, but he didn't argue. I had another trip up the hills ahead of me. The kid was seeing a captive bolt gun in action for the first time. He stood there, pale as a sheet, next to the bleeding, twitching carcass of a cow. Luckily, Perez arrived quickly with the loader. He was the only one who usually helped me with the jobs like this. He'd come to the farm 3 or 4 years after me, and by now he was experienced enough. "You okay, kid?" Perez asked the young man, who looked even paler by the second. The kid didn't answer. As soon as the pool of blood reached his boots, he bolted for the nearby bushes. "Heh," Perez chuckled. "I remember puking my guts out at my first calf birth." I didn't respond to Perez this time. I stared grimly at the 3 dead cows as they lay on the dusty ground. Their muscles still twitched now and then, blood running from their heads. Thick yellow fluid kept seeping from their infected sores. "You in a bad mood, Joseph?" Perez asked as he climbed up into the cab of the loader. 4 cows had the same marks today, I said quietly. "This isn't going to end well, Perez." "Ah," Perez waved it off. "It'll be fine. We've seen this before, you know that. There was a time we had to put down the entire herd, and we're still here." I stared at him hard. He wasn't wrong. Something like this had happened before. Maybe 12 years ago. Foot and mouth disease. We slaughtered the whole herd, buried them in the mass graves, and burned them. No one should ever have to see something like that. The smell, the piles, it haunted my dreams for a long time afterward. "This feels different," I said. "I don't know. It just does." "Stop it, Joseph," Perez said sharply. "Nothing's going to happen. Tomorrow morning we'll wake up and everything will be back to normal." I nodded. The kid came back from the bushes, and I couldn't take my eyes off the dead cow on the ground, its yellowish red sores still pulsing faintly. Luckily, there were no more sick cows that afternoon. Perez and I hauled the 3 carcasses up the hill and buried them there. I sent the kid back to the farm to help with the afternoon feeding. It was better that way. He wouldn't have handled the hills very well. By evening, I collapsed into bed, exhausted, but sleep wouldn't come. All I could think about were the sick cows. Maybe I was overthinking it, but there was a feeling at the back of my neck that something wasn't right, that something had already started. I woke up to shouting outside, and someone pounding hard on my door. "Joseph, get up," Perez yelled from outside. "Hurry." I don't think I'd ever thrown my own clothes on that fast. Moments later, I was running down the stairs and bursting out into the farmyard. The lights were on at the barns, 1 and 2. A few people were already standing outside. "What happened?" I ran over, panic creeping in. "Joseph, this is bad," Perez said, turning towards me. "Finally you're here, Joseph," Matt said as he stepped up, Mr. Johnson's older son. "What happened?" I asked again, my voice tight. "Go inside and see for yourself," Matt said. "I'm heading into town to get the vet. I'll notify the authorities, too." Matt left immediately. His face was dark, and I could tell this was serious. When I stepped into the barn, I saw exactly why everyone was shaken. Every single cow was down, wheezing. Their bodies were covered in infected sores. All of them. Every cow was sick. I swallowed hard, and I knew exactly what was coming next. Matt came back at sunrise with the veterinarian. Perez and a few older hands and I were guarding the barns. From that point on, no one was allowed to go anywhere. No animals, no people. The vet went inside the barn with Matt and then came back out not long after. Both of them were wearing medical masks and rubber gloves. "What's going on, Doc?" Perez asked immediately. I don't know," the veterinarian mumbled nervously. It might be anthrax or something similar. I honestly don't know." "Anthrax?" I asked, alarmed. "I can't say for sure," the vet said, his voice shaking. "That would be my guess, but the animals are still alive. They're not showing the signs you'd expect. I really don't know." "So what happens now?" I asked impatiently, looking back and forth between Matt and the vet. Neither of them answered. Matt stood there with his hands on his hips, staring off into nothing. The vet just kept looking at Matt, his eyes darting everywhere else, avoiding us. "I've notified the authorities," the vet said finally. "Until then, I think it would be best to spare the animals any further suffering." With that, the veterinarian turned and walked away without another word. Matt still didn't react. I knew he remembered the last time, too. He must have been about 16 back then. But he'd seen it, the piles of dead cattle, the way we burned the carcasses for days. The stench. "Matt?" Perez asked after a short silence. "You heard the vet," Matt said without looking at us. "The USDA's been informed. They'll show up eventually. Go ahead and start. Please. I'll talk to my father." It was happening again. Just like 15 years ago. I wore a medical mask, rubber gloves on my hands, and thick work gloves over those. I carried the compressed air captive bolt gun from cow to cow. Perez and I handled Barn 2. The cows sprawled across the ground, bellowed in pain. The stench of dying animals burned my nose, and their blistered, infected bodies turned my stomach. Matt was talking to his father, Mr. Johnson, so he was overseeing things now. Perez and a few of the older hands and I took care of putting the cows down. The others moved the remaining healthy animals into the further, separate barns. All we did was kill. I stood over the cattle lying on the ground. I looked at them one last time, then pulled the valve on the captive bolt gun. Again and again. Their blood soaked into the dry dirt of the barn floor. Blood and waste mixed into filth. I walked through it all in rubber boots, moving from one dying animal to the next, knowing this was probably the most bearable part of the entire process. Around noon, an SUV from the USDA arrived. By then, we were already finished killing the animals. I stood outside smoking on the porch while Perez stayed inside the barn, checking to make sure every cow was dead. Matt and Mr. Johnson spoke with the officials. I knew what came next. They'd take samples, speculate, argue, then a state team would show up to keep investigating, fencing off everything they could. But the ones digging the pits and dumping the carcasses into them would be me and the others. They'd just supervise, bark orders, and make sure everything was done by the book. The rest of the day was nothing but waiting and arguing. Matt and his father walked the property with the authorities, fully suited up in protective gear. Meanwhile, we, the regular hands, were kept far away, waiting near the living quarters. Perez smoked almost nonstop and didn't say a single word. Neither did anyone else. "Perez, Joseph, get over here now," someone shouted, then broke into a run from the small group gathered outside the housing. For a moment, I couldn't even process what was happening. My head felt heavy and foggy, but for a second I saw Samson, the large gray horse, snorting nervously in the yard in front of the barns. My mind snapped clear. Samson and the rest of the healthy animals had already been moved to the distant barn by a few of the others. How the hell had he gotten back here? As I ran towards Samson, a raw panic washed over me. He was sick. Thick saliva dripped from his mouth. His eyes were bloodshot, and his body was covered in sores. Perez. I stopped short when I saw it. Perez froze too. He just stared at the horse and took a long drag from his cigarette. "He got loose." A young guy ran up to us. "Broke out of the barn. I'm sorry." No one said a word. There was nothing to say. I was the one who shot Samson. Matt couldn't do it. Perez couldn't either. Matt brought the rifle from his father's office, but he just stood there beside the horse with shaking hands. The USDA people told us not to let him suffer, and protocol was already pushing for euthanasia anyway. We dragged Samson into the barn, and when they checked the animals we'd moved, the ones they thought were still healthy, it turned out every single one of them was sick. The dog, the cats, the pigs, the goats, the chickens, the horses, every last one of them was dying. We put them out of their misery. I couldn't let them suffer, and someone had to do it. I barely slept that night. Everything I owned had been disinfected. I felt like a walking chemical container. No one talked anymore. The others didn't gather in groups. A heavy, mournful silence settled over the entire farm. In the morning, like always, I woke up with the sunrise, expecting to hear the rooster, but there was no crowing. I found the bird in the barn, its neck twisted at an unnatural angle. When I stepped out into the yard, the cool morning air still had a bite to it, but felt good against my skin. Someone was stumbling around out there, swaying like a drunk. "Hey, you okay?" I called out. The young man turned towards me, his shirt unbuttoned, his face twisted into a grotesque mask of pain. It was Jeffrey, Mr. Johnson's younger son. We hadn't seen him in days. I still don't know where he came from. What was worse were the sores. Reddish, yellow-tinged lesions glowed beneath his shirt. They were the same as the animals. "Joseph," Jeffrey said in a trembling voice, "what's happening to me?" I swallowed hard and started backing away. That's when I heard something that completely caught me off guard. A cow bellowing. It came from the barns, right from where Jeffrey was standing. "What the fuck is going on?" I muttered to myself. The barn doors exploded outward with a deafening crash. The massive panels flew through the air. One slammed down nearby the chicken coop. The other, like something out of a nightmare, came crashing down onto Jeffrey where he stood. I watched, frozen in place, my legs locked, trembling as the horror unfolded. But the barn wasn't empty. Something began to spill out. It was enormous, about the size of a truck. It moved slowly, sluggishly. When it emerged into the morning light, I thought I was going to pass out. The slaughtered animals had fused together, oozing forward like the remnants of some obscene mass grave. Horse legs kicked uselessly from the bulk. Cow heads, udders, and limbs hung together with the blistered remains of cats, dogs, and pigs. The thing bellowed, barked, and neighed all at once. "What the hell is that?" Perez ran up beside me. I don't know," I stammered. Everyone poured out into the yard. Some were swearing, others just stood there, staring in stunned silence at the slowly rolling lump of fused animal parts. We watched in horror as the thing slid fully into the morning sunlight. Then it seemed to notice us. It stopped for a moment. The horses screamed, the dogs began barking wildly. Then it twisted. Flowing mass surged towards us at such speeds that everyone turned and ran. It was pure, unfiltered chaos. The thing rampaged like a maddened horse, smashing and tearing through everything in its path. It crushed people beneath its bulk and absorbed them like sticky clay, pulling their bodies into itself along with the dirt. Dust filled the air, mixed with the fused animal masses and the blind panic of people running for their lives. You couldn't see anything. "Joseph, run!" Perez grabbed my arm. "Get out of here!" He yanked me forward, and we took off towards the main house. The horror slid past us, close enough that I could feel it. Then Perez was gone. I looked around in a daze. The mass was chasing others now. Horse legs kicked wildly. Cow heads swung back and forth. And by then, half-melted human body parts were fused into it, waving obscenely as it moved. I kept running and launched myself through the front door of the house like a flea. I hit the floor and crawled under the nearest table. Dust, blood, and filth clung to my clothes. I curled up beneath the kitchen table, hands clamped over my ears, shaking. But the sounds outside didn't fade. Screams tore through the air, grown men shrieking in ways I'd never heard before. The cows bellowed like a stampede. Dogs barked wildly. Pigs screamed in rage and terror. The house shook under the creature's rampage outside. Like a helpless child, I wanted to scream beneath the table, but no sound came out of my throat. The house trembled. Wooden beams cracked. The roof collapsed with a groan. Outside, sheets of metal from the barn clattered and flew apart as if a tornado were tearing through the farm. All I could do was wait, hands pressed tight over my ears. I stayed there until evening. Eventually, the noise died down. The pounding stopped. A dead, suffocating silence settled over the farm. The sun was barely glowing red on the horizon when I crawled out from under the table. Half the house was gone. If I'd hidden in the living room instead of the kitchen, I'd be dead. I managed to crawl out through the ruins and into the yard. Outside, it looked like the aftermath of a storm. The barns were gone, their remains scattered across the property. Pieces of dead bodies stained the gravel red. The dusty ground was filthy everywhere. Matt stood there in the middle of the yard. One look at his face told me his mind was empty. He was somewhere very far away. I stood there coughing from the dust, staring at the destruction that thing had left behind. In the distance, headlights cut through the darkening landscape. Animal control, maybe, or something like it, but whatever they'd come for was already long gone. There was no trace of the mass, only the devastation it had left behind.
Wait. Is this thing still out and about?
Unfortunately, yes. It comes by once in a while and has caused a lot of devastation before we figured out how to deter it.
How do we deter it?
That is a story for a different day, my four-legged friend. Get some rest, and I'll see you again soon.
I guess. Ah, of course he's gone again. Note to self: keep an eye out for a giant rampaging blob.